finished up the wrapping on Sunday night. I had about 2 more things that I had just gotten, and they needed to be wrapped up, so I finished that, and then added the last 2 presents to the pile under the tree before I went to bed. On Monday morning, I got a text from my sister saying that they weren't able to catch their flight because our dad got food poisoning, so they were going to arrive a few days later than they anticipated. I told her it was fine. In fact, I was glad to hear they were going to be getting here later than they thought, because I wasn't done setting up the 2 guest rooms yet, and I didn't really want to hear my mom complain about the beds not being done correctly. So I spent Monday afternoon making sure that everything was perfect. I was finally done. I had dusted every shelf, wiped down every mirror and window. I vacuumed every rug, organized all my books, and I even bought new shower curtains. I wasn't sure of the exact date that my family would be arriving, so I sent my sister a text to ask, but she didn't reply, so I assumed that by Tuesday afternoon they would get here. Tuesday morning I was awoken by a peculiar smell coming from downstairs. I woke up and made my way down to the kitchen, thinking that maybe I had forgotten to throw away the bag full of food that I had cleaned out of my fridge, but it was gone. I had taken it out the night before, so what was the smell? It was everywhere, in the kitchen, in the pantry, the laundry room, the halls, and the living room. I woke up. It was the strongest in the living room. As I walked into the room, I gagged. It was awful and unlike anything I had ever smelled before. I ran back into the kitchen and grabbed a clean dish towel and held it up to my face as I walked back into the living room. I was beginning to think that maybe my cat had brought in a dead bird again, but the smell was so strong that it had to be one huge bird in order to cause all of this. I looked behind the couches and under the coffee table for anything that could have been causing the smell, but I found nothing. And then I noticed the Christmas presents. There was a puddle of something leaking out of the presents and into the green rug underneath the tree. I couldn't tell what it was, but I could see the stain in the rug, and I noticed that some of the liquid was beginning to seep out onto the wooden floors. I got closer and the smell got even stronger. I reached out and poked the present closest to me. It was sort of squishy, and the sound of wetness and paper followed after I removed my finger. I looked around and noticed that all of the presents appeared to be leaking something. But how? I hadn't bought anything that would be leaking. There was a necklace for my mom, a collection of Stephen King books for my sister, a watch for my dad, shoes for my sister's fiancée, Carla, a watch for my boyfriend, and a sweater for my friend, Samantha. None of those things would be causing a leak. I started to inspect the tree for things now. Maybe something was stuck in the branches and rotting, but again, I found nothing. I crouched back down and grabbed one of the presents, pulling out onto the wooden floors in order to take a better look. I noticed that the present was very poorly wrapped. In fact, it looked like Every single present contained a body part from one of my family members and Carla. These were distinguished a bit quicker due to some tattoos and scars on the parts that were found, although there's still running tests to make sure, and the others were yet to be identified. My cat was alright though. The police think they had been dead for quite a few days now, definitely before my sister sent me that text the other day. They don't have any leads. The only thing the intruder left was a picture of me sleeping, which included a gloved hand holding up my phone. The date on my phone was November 25th, which the police think is the day that the presents were replaced. On the back of the picture, it said, "Merry Christmas" in blood. That is absolutely crazy. That's insane. That's really insane. I wonder who did it. Like, did they know the family? Because it's not just random people that they put under the tree, you know. Okay, this next one is by Neon Tempo, and it's titled "The Third Day of Christmas is Well Behaved." Depending how long this one is, because it is pretty long, it might be our last one for the night, but we'll see. They arrived quietly, unannounced and understated, hanging patiently from the common hackberries of Serenity Falls. No one knows who put them up, or when for that matter. So subtle was their appearance that by the time anybody noticed the strange posters on Wilt Avenue, the low-quality printer paper had already become waterlogged, black ink bleeding into empty space like fungus on a branch, and a green-orange plume of rust forming across the cheap thumbtacks which pinned each notice to its tree. I wish they'd never received the attention they did. I wish we'd all simply passed them by until the rain and snow soaked the stock into shreds of watered tissue, smudging the text into pools of grey mush, degrading its structure until they slipped from their pins and fell to the ground. Harmless mulch, dead words decomposing on a wet sidewalk. Suffice to say, that isn't how this story ends. It was earlier in the month, November 3rd, I think, when someone, somewhere, passed by the modest black and white posters and, presumably following a quick double take, circulated a grainy picture on one of those towns' message boards. Our ever-dwindling online community is propped up on the industry of small business owners, farmers, yard sale enthusiasts, and bored parents, the latter of whom started sharing the picture around almost immediately. Which one of you thought of this? On Shetland Street too, took a flyer in front of Archie this morning. New elf on the shelf. Someone should take these down. I didn't comment personally. I'm a long way from being a parent. I'm actually not sure I want kids all that much, but I still spend a lot of time on these parenting forums. I've been babysitting other people's children for a few years now. It's pretty chill, gives me time to do homework and writing, and it's one of the rare jobs available to 11 to 15-year-olds in Serenity Falls. As someone on the more senior end of that spectrum, I've had a few years to make a name for myself. Sarah Jennings, a babysitter extraordinaire, more reliable than an older sibling, easier to kick out than a mother-in-law. I was halfway through posting my availability in the odd job section, looking to land a few gigs in the lead-up to the holiday season, when my egregious attention span deflected me scanning over it, however, as I made my way back to the other tab. I was able to make out the poster's key phrase at the very top, scrawled in black Sharpie, much larger than anything around it. Bad Man's Home. A few days later, I got to see the notice in person. I was heading to a regular babysitting job, the Sullivan household on Wold Avenue. Mr. Sullivan is one of the few adults who has my number in his phone, largely due to the fact that he's a single father whose place of work is prone to late-night meltdowns. Mr. Sullivan's kid, a 7-year-old named Charlie, is super cute but undoubtedly a handful. Where a lot of kids nowadays can sink themselves into a tablet for 3 to 4 hours without coming up for air, Charlie would probably end up using it as a frisbee. He spends every waking moment running through the house, jumping down the stairs, crawling under tables, wielding an imaginary sword to save an imaginary friend from an imaginary foe. My job is to watch him bounce off the walls until he tires himself out, keeping him off the furniture and making sure he doesn't get near the knives. I was actually looking forward to seeing him as I walked down Wold Avenue, awkwardly fishing some headphones out of my backpack. When I was about 3 houses down, I saw a white rectangle of weathered paper hanging against the trunk of one of Serenity Falls' blackberry trees, the last tree before Mr. Sullivan's house. Immediately recalling the rather hysterical forum post from a few days before, I kept my eyes on it as I drew closer, the words "Bad Man's Home" coming quickly into view. After approaching a little further, I stopped walking and examined the poster in full view. Bad Man's Home. He has come here winter long to take misbehaved and cruel. Take a number, call if boys and girls is bad, is cruel, breaks or hits. No tree for presents, no chimney for toys, no returns when stock, boys and girls kept. The bottom of the poster had been cut into little strips of paper, each one had the same cell phone number scrolled along messily, ending in 0026. That was it. Nothing special, nothing world-ending, just some Babadook-y, Krampus-y boogeyman that a random parent had put up in the run-up to Christmas. Whoever had done it, they'd made the poster look like it was written by some kind of monster. Jagged, uneven letters, and the stilted syntax of something with only a vague grasp of human language. I have to admit, it wasn't bad work. I could imagine the strips at the bottom being torn from the sheets around town, brandished by impatient mothers at their misbehaving children, the number half-dialed by beleaguered fathers in a bid to quell their kids' tantrums. On this poster alone, 4 strips had already been torn off. I wasn't so sure it sat well with me, as I knocked on Mr. Sullivan's door and heard his footsteps from the hall. But then again, I only have these kids for an evening a week. Parenting is a full-time job, and I'd learned early on that I was in no position to judge. A Santa here, a boogeyman there. I guess these things existed for a reason. Hey Sarah, thanks for coming. I know it's short notice. Mr. Sullivan appeared at the door quickly, putting his jacket on as soon as it opened. Charlie's in the living room, and there's money for you to order food on the table. No worries at all, thank you. Okay, I'll be back around the normal time, but I'll give you a call when I'm on my way. He smiled as we changed places, calling back through the door as he rushed out down the steps. Charlie, be good for Sarah, okay? Curiously, Charlie didn't reply. In fact, the house His knees were tucked up against his chest, his arms wrapped tightly around his legs. His guard was up, and whatever shadowy force he feared, it was clearly too powerful for his sword and shield to handle. "Hey Charlie, are you okay?" He didn't answer. Instead he looked up at me silently, then back to the corner of the dark room with a sense of fear and vigilance. As soon as I sat down, he immediately latched onto me, tightly and wordlessly, as if I was the last rock before the waterfall. His eyes never wavered, however, remaining fixed on that dark point in space, paying it his unflinching attention. Once my eyes were able to adjust, I saw what he was staring at. A small side table, and resting on top of it, a cordless landline phone. We sat there for almost an hour. Any questions I asked ran into a wall of silence, struggling uselessly to get any purchase on his mumbled one-word answers. I'd almost given up entirely when, in the dancing light of the TV, he turned his attention away from the phone and, for the first time, towards me. "Sarah, what's a femur?" he asked quietly, under his breath, as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. "Where did you hear that?" Again, no answer. "It's a bone in your leg. It's the thigh bone," I replied, lifting one of my legs up to the couch and pointing. Charlie held in space for a moment, pulling back into himself, in the same way an ocean recedes before a tidal wave wrecks the shore. Seconds later, the steadily crescendoing air raid siren of a child's cry filled the room, an unchecked river of tears streaming from Charlie's eyes. I felt his grip tighten, latching onto me even harder, as if he was scared that letting go would cause him to fall sideways into the dark corner of the living room, never to be heard from again. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the night, but he kept me by his side the entire time, his hand only letting go of mine when he finally drifted off to sleep later in the evening. I never learned why he'd asked that question, or what he'd heard to make my answer so deeply distressing to him. I had to admit, though, the kid was better behaved than I'd ever seen him, and in some ways that's what concerned me the most. And a week later, new posters went up. I'd already heard about it as I made my way down Weld Avenue to the Sullivan house. The reaction to the posters was decidedly cooler than it had been a week prior, but it was still a definite talking point among the parenting community, of whom a small handful had, in some way or another, employed the posters with their children. To be fair, they're being super well behaved now. Did other people try? Didn't expect the call to go through. I never called it. Don't know why anyone would. I think this is worth telling Sergeant Ways about. I'm taking them down whenever I see them. This is not funny. The next time I visited Mr. Sullivan's house, I made a point to check on the latest edition. The poster was only about 3 days old this time, not nearly as worn as their predecessors. Batman's home. He is choosing. Expect him and behave. Answer his call. No doors here, no windows, no running on broken things. The vague sense of threat was elevated now, or perhaps the opposite, more grounded. manage to say more than a single word. It was always under his breath, solemnly looking down at his creations. "Mine doesn't look very aerodynamic," I said, holding the intentionally shitty Lego ship in front of him after an hour or so of building. "Can you help me make it better?" "It's okay. They're getting built in space," Charlie mumbled, going back to his work. "Oh, okay. Then maybe I'll add some." A noise cut across the silence, barreling up the stairs from the living room and piercing through the door. As soon as it reached our ears, Charlie finally looked up, his eyes awash with total, mind-gripping fear. Someone was calling the landline. After a few rings, Charlie sprang to his feet and bolted towards the door. I called him a little as he went, stopping him as gently as possible, but I could immediately feel him starting to struggle against me, increasingly distressed with every passing moment. "Charlie, what's wrong?" "We have to pick up the phone, Sarah. We have to pick up the phone. We need to." Hey, it's okay. It's okay. Let's just see who it is. We'll go together, okay?" I took Charlie's hand as he pulled me all the way down the stairs and into the living room. By the time he reached the phone, the call had ended. Just as I was about to turn away, the blue screen of the phone lit up, and the ringing began once more. I felt Charlie's hand clench my fist as I read the incoming number. It was from a cell ending in 0026. I didn't want to answer, but the phone just kept ringing, again and again and again. Every time it stopped, we had only a brief moment to wait before the ringing filled the room once more. In the same way that a word you've said too often starts to lose its meaning. The ringtone almost seemed to change as we listened to it loop over and over, its banal tone fading away, replaced by something eerie and sinister, the constant wailing whine of an uninvited guest. "Let me in, let me in, let me in, let me in." "You have to answer or it won't stop," Charlie whimpered after the number called the 7th time. As this number called before, I looked down at him, the phone hailing us with sickening patience. Dad called it, and then they called back, and he talked on the phone and yelled, but they didn't say anything, who they were, and they said they were gonna. He spoke quickly, a runaway train of thought that had dropped back into his mind when he could no longer bring himself to say the words out loud. Even as he stopped talking, I could tell the thought was continuing on, running through his brain, prompting a fresh bout of tears to escape. Through it all, the phone kept ringing. Turning away from Charlie, gripping his hand tightly, I snatched up the receiver and accepted the call. For a moment, when I put it to my ear, all I could hear was deep, low breathing. The boy. The voice was unimaginably low, grating and deep, as if the words were being dragged over gravel on the way toward me. The 2 words were spoken with a bristling anger, an impatient demand. If Charlie had heard this voice before, then it was no wonder he'd been terrified of the phones in this house. "No, you're talking to me." I squeezed Charlie's hand, hoping to project the confidence I didn't feel myself. "I want you to stop calling. I don't want you to call this house again." The line went silent for just a moment. A choice has been made. No toys, no running. The misbehaved come home. Fuck you. Using the momentum of my own anger, I slammed the phone down, hanging up the call. It didn't ring again. say?" Charlie asked, his voice quivering. "Nothing," I responded as I walked back over to the couch. The night went by uneasily. I tried to comfort Charlie as much as I could, but I think he knew how deeply disturbed I'd been by the incident. I think he saw that I was as worried as him. I waited in the kitchen even after Mr. Sullivan came back, caught between a strong reluctance to walk home alone and a complete refusal to leave Charlie in the house without me or his father. I'd called my parents for company on the way back. "Did you eat dinner?" Mr. Sullivan asked, concerned. "No. Do you want anything before your parents get here?" "Mr. Sullivan, did you call the number on those posters outside?" I don't know if it's because of the latent anger in my voice, or simply the complete left-field nature of my inquiry, but I saw Mr. Sullivan's eyes darken. "Did someone call?" I let my silence answer his question and waited for him to answer mine. Mr. Sullivan took a pained, reluctant breath. He kept running off all day at the store. On the way home, I couldn't keep up with him. I had work to do. I'd seen the posters around, so I took a flyer I thought some parent put them up, some spooky morality tale before Christmas. The next day he was climbing on the furniture, and I pretended to dial the number, and he looked embarrassed, but I didn't have the time for him to wallow. My mum was only a few streets away, and I still didn't understand what was happening. Pretended. Yeah, that's the thing. Mr. Sullivan looked at me, fear in his eyes. Reluctant as he sounded, he also spoke as if it had been torture, keeping all this to himself. "I have never called that number. I didn't even dial. I just held the phone to my ear and..." Mr. Sullivan looked down, dreading the question he was about to ask. "What did he say?" I could see the fear in his eyes, his worry for his son, terrified. I didn't want to tell him what the man on the phone said to me. The idea of reciting the insidious threat felt physically repulsive. He said a choice has been made. He said the misbehaved come home. Mr. Sullivan stayed silent for a moment before muttering, "I never meant for..." The doorbell rang, making me jump a little and causing him to stop mid-sentence. I had a feeling he was grateful for the interruption. My mum had arrived to walk me home. I left Mr. Sullivan behind, not sure what I could say to the man to make him feel better. As soon as I made it down the front steps and onto the street where my mother was waiting to collect me, I remember feeling a distinct chill running across the back of my neck, a shiver that cooled my very being as we made our way back down the darkened street. I told myself it was merely a byproduct of the biting winter that had drifted out into the town that night. But as me and my mum turned the corner from Wild Avenue and the Sullivan house fell out of view, I distinctly felt the sensation ebb away. It was something else then, a subtle decision when he called me up a few days later, cancelling my next 2 jobs with him. I think I'm just going to work from home for a week or two, he said, soberly down the phone. I'm sorry, I just want to keep an eye on things. I could understand why. The forum post was slowly thinning down, now solely populated by 2 or 3 sets of parents who had actually taken flyers from the sinister notices. However, as those without a stake in the game drifted from the conversation, the remaining comments grew more hysterical than ever. They spoke about receiving calls at all hours of the night, feeling like they were being watched as they walked their children into school, hearing someone move around outside their homes, knocking on doors, passing by windows. Whatever this was, it had moved far beyond a joke. The final few parents left in the common thread started to discuss using their sick days, staying home with their kids or passing them off to grandparents who lived out of town. I don't know whether they followed through with their ideas. I dropped off the message board shortly after, believing my part in the whole ordeal was over. Last night I discovered otherwise. It was 11:03. I was in bed, trying to pull myself away from the harsh, hypnotic glow of my phone screen and chase an elusive, uneasy sleep. Suddenly everything went dark, the backlight of my phone turning black except for 2 expectant circles, one red, one green, and the number of an incoming caller, a number ending in 0026. I felt my throat drop into the pit of my stomach. I stared at the number for almost a minute, my heartbeat quickly outpacing my phone's rhythmic shuddering, before I realized it wasn't going to stop. So far, my involvement with these strange events had been indirect, partial, merely the result of my being in the wrong place in the presence of those at the center of the being's dark lens. Now I was at home alone, and the call was meant for me. With a quivering hand, I reached out and slowly led the green circle to the other side of the screen. The same deep breathing, a noise I hoped I'd never hear again, drifted through the phone. What do you want? I asked, anxious for the answer, yet treasuring every second that the man chose not to reply. When he finally responded, he said only 2 words: "He's home." After that, the line went dead. For the briefest moment, I lay paralyzed, held firm by that dark, dreadful admission. The next moment, I was up, throwing the covers aside, switching out my thermal pajamas for a pair of jeans and an old jacket. As I burst out of my room into the dark corridor, I screamed for my mum to wake up. My voice broke and shuddered as I spoke, a pressurized cry of worry and terror erupting from within me in one desperate syllable. I could tell she'd heard it in my voice. I could hear her rushing out of bed and up to the door. "Sarah, what is it? What's wrong?" she half whispered, as she emerged from the dark bedroom, pulled from the edge of sleep into a dark hallway, needing a moment to adjust to the waking world. I didn't know what to say in response. I didn't have a plan or time to explain myself. Instead, all I can bring myself to say was, "I need a ride to the Sullivans." I told her everything I knew on the drive over. As strange as the chain of events sounded, she seemed to believe me. I guess she'd noticed I hadn't been myself lately. Halfway through the story, she pulled her work phone from the glove box and handed it over, telling me to call the cops. We got there about 5 minutes later. eyes from its shiny new thumbtack without breaking stride, crumpling it up as I pushed through the crowd and stepped up towards the house. The door was ajar, the lock broken, all the lights in the house were off. The only cop present was at the bottom of the steps, facing away from me, squatting down as if examining some evidence on the ground. I called out to her as soon as I was in earshot. "Where's Charlie? Where's Charlie Sullivan?" I cast the question desperately into the air, terrified of the fresh nightmare its response might bring. "Sarah?" The cop turned around at my question, but she wasn't the one who responded. As she turned to face me, rising back to her feet, the 7-year-old figure of Charlie Sullivan pushed past and started running up to me. Tears that had become all too familiar streaming